I never felt in awe of him. I just thought sometimes he was funny. When we used to have a little argument about God, he said, oh, you know, I'm not so sure about God. I'm perfectly willing if he shows up, fine. I used to say to you, of course, if he shows up, he'll probably look like you. And, I guess that I thought before I got mad at him, I thought that he would have some kind of a solution to life's problems. Then I found I had to find the solution myself, which I suppose was what he did. Brings you to that point.
We didn't know whether we were fish, flesh, or fowl, and we had to find ourselves anew. I dreamt that Jung was a Protestant clergyman standing at a pulpit, giving a sermon, and we were all in the pews, and when he finished his sermon, all the others got up and began to chant mandala, mandala, the way they might in Christian times have said Hosanna. And this represented a worshipful attitude to Jung that was laughable, as you can imagine. So I thought, I hate to tell Jung this dream, but I did. And he said, well, of course you should feel that way. I was simply projecting my own Protestant background, making Jung a father figure, making the other people into a group which they were not.
Freud always wanted to break a transference and to resolve it. To resolve it and to bring people to life again, down to the adaptation to life again. Mm-hmm. But Jung had another point of view, had the feeling as long as we have a strong transference, one must serve it, because he said there is a greater personality involved in transference. And we don't know what this greater personality has in storage, and so we must serve it. And that was tremendously difficult for Jung. He often told us, you see, I should have 10 lives in order really to follow the development of the integration process so deeply as he did with us all.
Yes.
But that was also what interested him. He many times said, without you women, I couldn't have developed my psychology.
I had a case that was an intelligent young woman. She was a student of philosophy, very good mind, where one could expect easily that she would see that I am not the parental authority. But she was utterly unable to get out of this delusion. And in such a case, one always has recourse to the dreams. It is just as if one would ask the unconscious, now what do you say to such a condition? You see, she says, with the unconscious, of course I know you are not my father, but I just feel like that. It is like that. I depend upon you. And I say, now you see what the unconscious says. Now the unconscious produces dreams in which I really assumed a very curious role. You know, she was the little infant. She was sitting on my knees. I held her in my arms. I was a very tender father to the little girl, you know. And the last dream of that series was, I cannot tell you all the dreams, was that it was out in nature. I stood in a field of wheat, an enormous field of wheat that was ripe for harvest. And I was a giant. And I held her in my arm like a baby. And the wind was blowing over that field of wheat. Now, you know, when the wind is blowing over wheat field, these waves in the wheat field.
Yes.
And with these waves, I swayed like that, putting her as if it were to sleep, you know. And she felt as being in the arms of a God, of the Godhead. And I thought, now the harvest is ripe, and I must tell her. And I told her, you see, what you want and what you project into me, because you are not conscious of it, is you have the idea of a deity. You don't possess. Therefore, you see it in me. That clicked. Because, you know, she had a rather intense religious education. Of course, it all vanished later on. And something disappeared from her world. Her world became merely personal, and that religious conception of the world was non-existent, apparently. And so she certainly became aware of an entirely heathenish image that comes fresh from the archetype. She had not the idea of a Christian God or of an Old Testament Yahweh. It was a heathenish God, you see, a God of nature, of vegetation. He was the wheat himself. He is the spirit of the wheat, the spirit of the wind. And she was in the arms of that Numen. No. Now, that is the living experience of an archetype. Now, that made a tremendous impression upon that girl, and instantly it clicked. She saw what she really was missing, that missing value, that was in the form of a projection in myself and made myself indispensable to her. Yes. Now, that is a luminous experience, you see. And that is the thing that people are looking for. An archetypal experience that gives them an incorruptible value. You see, they depend upon other conditions. They depend upon their desires, their ambitions, depend upon other people, because they have no value in themselves. They have nothing in themselves. They are only rational, and they are not in the possession of a treasure that would make them independent. But when that girl can hold that experience, then she doesn't depend anymore. She cannot depend anymore, because that value is in herself. And that is a sort of liberation. And that is, of course, makes her complete, you know. Inasmuch as she can realize such a luminous experience, she is able to continue her path, her way, her individuation. The acorn can become an oak and not a donkey. Nature will take her course. She will become that which she is from the beginning.
If you have a relationship to C.G. Jung, then you have to work on it, and the meaning is a result, perhaps, you see. One can say I projected on him a father, but I also projected on him a mother, you see. And the one who accepted me, I could say. And from this, in the course of the years, I found a place in this world. I found a place in myself and in the world. A transference is a projection. Yes. So I projected on him this and that, and he took it seriously, and he acted accordingly. But he never laughed at it. He accepted it. He accepted it.
I remember once a patient wanted to marry Jung. She was convinced that he was the man for her and for her lifetime. In vain, Jung explained to her that he already was married. She continued to be convinced, and therefore Jung accepted. She went on, prepared a marriage dinner, had printed cards, everything was ready. Jung continued to accept in full confidence of unconscious reactions coming from the patients or from him. And the day before the planned marriage, he got an express letter from the patient telling him that this night God had told her that unhappily enough the marriage would not be possible. The patient came out of her psychosis, had always in her memory this event, and was completely balanced afterwards. That's how Jung handles the transference situation as a full reality, and having fully confidence in the unconscious, which would lead the patient and himself through the seemingly difficult situation.
He could see what every woman was really substantially like and helped her to find her main interest: literature, politics, psychotherapy, or astrology, or what you want. He had an art to follow a person until she found herself. And the value of transference was great for Jung himself.
It really was as if he was always inside of your unconscious and not trespassing, but because he has been where everyone was, and so he knew how to be there. He also would never use any of his terms, ever. My last interview, I told him a dream, and I realized, my God, that man is 85 years old. And it was pages of dream, and so I only told him half the dream, thinking I can't put that all on him. And so then he started. You know, he didn't ask you for one association. Very seldom he did. He just started to talk. And I was kind of not making the connection which what he was talking about had anything to do with my dream, but I knew better that I will find the connection if I listen eventually. And suddenly he said, "Oh, that is as if you dream," and he told me the second part of my dream, which I hadn't told him.
After about 2 years, I had a dream in which Jung had died. And I was in his house in the antechamber where he was laid up. And I paced up the room, very depressed, very unhappy. And suddenly my feeling changed, as if I pulled up my socks and, well, all right, he's dead now, it is fast to go on and work. I told Jung that dream, and he said, well, all right, now you can see patients. You're ready to see patients.
One didn't see it, but one felt it, that a ray of his spirit was falling onto us. And one was terribly spoiled, because compared with this, as a man, we are no more so interesting.
Yes, that must have been a problem. And
I must say, besides one's own husband.
well, you were married. And
I was married.
You had a deep relationship. And how did your husband feel? Did he ever feel jealous of Jung?
Clear. All our husbands, the husbands of our women around, were very jealous.
Yes.
But since they knew, understand, that Jung was not falling into the traps and wishes of the women, so they had not to be really jealous, because Jung never misused his position and all these transferences.
Now, Jung worked in this rejected feminine world of the unconscious for years. People came to him. He was particularly successful with women patients. And one person came into his life very early on, because she's already with Jung and Emma Jung at the famous conference in Vienna, where they are all photographed together. And that is Tony Wolff.
Well, all I can say is that, of course, she was a most extraordinary person. There's no doubt about that, and she was a great head to Jung too. I mean, when it comes to Psychological types, for instance, she played a very important part there.
In his development of his
he
ideas.
had all his knowledge in philosophy and so on and so forth. And she had been one of his patients to begin with.
I see.
Oh, yes. And I remember very well, he was very proud on the fact that he had succeeded in curing her.
A lot of people who knew her said that they despaired of her ever recovering from whatever her psychological disturbance was. I think one must accept that it was profound enough to fit the rare, exceptional spirit that she was, because in a sense, the rarer, the more exceptional the spirit, the deeper the psychological suffering. And Jung managed to bring her out of this, so that by the time of the famous Vienna conference, she was already an integrated, working personality. And to me, that photograph is very moving, because the one who looks young, as if she's just been born, is Toni Wolff. She sits there with these large eyes. Jung had an instinct that what was wrong with life, what made life tear apart, made it incomplete, was because the feminine was rejected, driven insane, driven mad by a world of men, rejected by a masculine-dominated world. Time when he let himself go, and when he landed deep down in what he came to call the collective unconscious, this rejected feminine in himself confronted him.
Toni Wolff was being analyzed by Jung. When Jung started to have his active imagination, it really got going and he got rather unstable. And that Toni Wolff simply said that she wasn't going to go on with her analysis with him and that she was going to have a relationship with him. And more or less, I gather, took him by the ear and did so.
In this unfamiliar, terrifying underground of the collective unconscious, she was Jung's guide, to such an extent that she lived with him. And she took over the whole of the burden. And of course the tensions caused by that in Zurich and in the family must have been tremendous.
She reflected his anima in a way that Mrs. Jung didn't.
It was she who introduced him to all the Eastern things, Eastern spirituality, Eastern philosophy, and so on.
They were lovers, I take it?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Emma knew of their relationship, but she didn't wish to divorce you.
Oh, good gracious, no. It would never have entered her head.
No, I see.
I mean, that wouldn't have been done. I mean,
that's rather unusual.
No, I don't think so. Not at that time. I mean, I don't even think nowadays. I mean, she had 4 children, and I don't think that Jung would have wanted a divorce at all.
Well, perhaps this isn't really relevant, but not many women will countenance open infidelity.
Please forgive me. I am not so sure if that is not a kind of British, maybe even English prejudice or something. I think that...
I think it's an American one, too.
Is it?
Without Toni Wolff, he couldn't have made it, because she had breaks in a way, and she was stopping him always when he had a temperament where he was losing himself completely and without boundaries. And Toni Wolff stopped him and always brought him back to reality, and that was tremendously important for Jung.
Was she originally a patient?
And then she also understood him.
Yes.
She had such a bright mind that she grasped it even before he understood it. And she was also really furthering his intuition very much, because at that time he was also, I mean, he was a medical doctor. He had worked as asylum of Burkölzli, and he was very intellectual until really he came to know her.
That was the point. There was nothing shadow in it, no shadow. And Jung wanted to be and tried to be as conventional as possible, wherever possible. So that in the inner world, and in his relationships with both women, he could be as unconventional as he really was, as unique as he really was. Yeah, it was quite a thing for him to do around 1910. You know, the Victorian age wasn't quite so far gone, and it wasn't anything he hid. You know, I remember I was walking in Zurich, there near the Institute, and there was Jung and Tony Wolff walking. You know? There was nothing hiding, and it was in this relationship that he had these tremendous experiences of the conjunctio. It's when he understood the mystical background of sexuality, mystical or the psychological archetype that was working there.
That was later such an established relationship, and Mrs. Jung was so included that I am very sure he would not have parked his car in front of Tony Wolff's house, who was 1 minute away from the Institute, and everybody would know when he was there and when he was not there, if he would have had the slightest doubts about it.
And so this relationship with Tony Wolff was not an affair, it was another wife.
2 wives and 1 man. That's an excuse. My opinion is he should, as CG, he should know earlier that that was his anima, and so come to a stop.
One day, Mrs. Jung approached me and said, "Would you please cooperate analytically with me and Tony Wolff?" So we did a threesome analysis for quite a long period of time.
Oh.
Yeah, that was very funny.
I see. Mutual dreams or just Jung's dreams?
No Jung's dreams. Mrs. Jung's dreams and Tony's dreams and my dreams.
Oh, all 3?
Yeah.
I see. And you found this very helpful?
Was interesting.
Very,
was
very interesting.
She wasn't at all browbeaten by Jung. She was downright and direct, and she did a lot of work on his papers too. She obviously stood by Jung all through his periods of crisis. She was a much more solid sort of character than Jung.
First, she had given birth to 5 children. And then Jung told us, and she told us, and she felt the need also to know more. And then she studied physics and mathematics and many other things. And then she had an analysis with her own husband.
She did?
Yes.
How difficult.
Yes. She had also another analysis, but the main thing was analysis with Jung. And afterwards, he allowed her to analyze. And she was a very good analyst, and the opposite of her husband. He was more intuition and thinking, and Emma Jung was sensation, mainly sensation, absolutely down to the earth, and more to that, to the depths of the earth.
Mrs. Jung had a fantastic sense of humor. She giggled and laughed, and she was very, very nice woman. Motherly, but I think she helped a lot in working out, let's say, the animus anima problem. It's those 3 who did the work, I think.
Emma Jung said to a close friend of mine just before she died that she had never ceased to be grateful in her life for Tony Wolff, because Tony Wolff was able to do for her husband something that she could not have done
I think what's remarkable is that they made it. And I think they're the ones, that Tony and Emma are the ones that made the threesome situation possible. They worked out something between them.
Jung, in his dedication copy of Answer to Job, wrote, well, I have to translate it, unasked dropped from heaven. Ungefragt vom Himmel gefallen. So, no, I think naturally the relationship changed, the relationship do change, but it existed.
And he was always very present and very concerned also about the future of life on this globe. I think he needed space and quietness to meditate about them and to find as much answer as he could find. It was at the same time, I think, a total participation, but also well, I wouldn't call it a withdrawal, but a philosophical distance, or I don't know how to call it.
He went to bowling so often during the year, and he did all his reading up there.
Most of the reading was done there, and also most of the writing?
Also, the writing.
In the fall of 1922.
So ist mit dem Velo noch Christnach?
He came by bicycle. Dr. Jung came by bicycle, on his bicycle from Christnach. The western part of the land was sold by Mr. Hugenwarter's father to Dr. Jung. About his father, and Dr. Jung had a very good relation. Das ist weiter. Gerade am Film. Ja, nein, das ist schön. Und der Bruder auch noch. Der Großvater. Und sie haben das im letzten Moment beschlossen.
Ja, mit jedem kriegt.
He spoke with everyone.
Man ist in Hochgeschichte behaupten.
And when they were in trouble, you see, for instance, with bringing in the hay before it came raining, Dr. Jung would help them.
a man is not complete when he lives in a world of statistical truth. He must live in a world of his biological truth. That is his biological truth. That is not merely statistics. Yet our natural science makes everything to an average, reduces everything to an average, and of course, all the individual qualities are wiped out. That, of course, is most unbecoming. It is unhygienic. It deprives people of their specific values, where they are individuals. It deprives them of the most important experiences of their life, where they experience their own value. And we think we are able to be born today and to live in no myth, without history. That is a disease. That's absolutely abnormal, because man is not born every day. He's once born in a specific historical setting with the specific historical qualities, and therefore he is only complete when he has a relation to these things. It's just as if you were born without eyes and ears, when you are growing up with no connection with the past. From the standpoint of natural science, you need no connection with the past. You can wipe it out. And that is a mutilation of the human being.
He had what the Greeks called techne, hence our word technology and so on. And techne means also art and skill. He lived his sensation, I think, in its natural state, and therefore it was very creative. He looked at the wall in his last years. You see the irregularities of the stone would create that picture, and then he would carve it out.